Hey guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow and I am back with an all new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on Russell Brand. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Now, first and foremost, it is important just to say at the get-go before we dive in, we are not trying Russell in the court of public opinion in this video. There's an overabundance of information out about him right now on the internet, even on YouTube. This is not about that. What we are going to be exploring in this video is not whether he is so-called innocent or guilty of the allegations that have recently been levied against him. We are, in fact, actually going to be addressing this and approaching it as if he is, in fact, guilty of what has been levied against him. However, again, it's not with the intention of through trying him in the court of public opinion, but it is so that we can peel back the three-dimensional veil in exploring what was going on with him on an energetic level that had led him to be that energetically compromised and to behave in such a fashion. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll briefly fill you in. In the last couple of days, an article has come out in which I want to say it was either 4 or 6 women that were previous partners, sexual partners of Russell Brand, have come forward and have claimed that he had had either non-consensual sex with them, or there are also allegations of sexual misconduct and sexual abuse that he had performed against these women. Now, as you know, my videos are 98% channeled information and 2% personal opinion. So here's my 2% personal opinion, and it comes with a big caveat, because as I had said at the beginning, we're approaching the information that has been levied against him as if it is in fact true. Keep that in mind. So we are not second guessing the validity of the allegations, okay? I am, however, just going to say that as an outsider looking in, the only thing to me that kind of like activated my spidey senses, and I was like, well, that's interesting, is first and foremost that these allegations are quite old. They are from, I believe I had read between 2003 and 2009. And that none of these women have actually brought any legal charges against Russell. So it's very conveniently playing out only in the court of public opinion at this time. Just keep that in mind, because that's something that's actually going to come up at the end of the video. But again, I'm also approaching it as if these women that have come forward are sharing actual events that had occurred with them between Russell Brand. But it is not so that we can try him in the court of public opinion. I have no interest in doing that. And I'm sure if you guys are here, you don't have any interest in doing that either. It is with the sole purpose of peeling back that three-dimensional veil and exploring what were the contributing factors that actually did lead to him behaving that way at that time. So now that we have gotten through a hella long intro, let's dive in. And for anybody that is new here, I'm going to just introduce myself. My name is Faye, and I am an energy reader. I'm an empath, I'm an intuitive, an astral traveler, remote viewer, all that cool esoteric stuff. And I will use any or all of those different extrasensory perceptions that have been gifted to me to explore the topics that I am looking at. In this case, I am specifically looking into the energy of Russell Brand. And I have about 9 or 10 pages of notes. Therefore, I'm going to be reading from it because, as I always say, I am nothing more than the hand that holds the pen that is bringing the channeled information in. The information is not of me, it just comes through me. And I like to stick to it as closely as I can because, again, it's not mine to take liberties with. I will be reading from my notebook. Okay, now really, with that in mind, let's dive in. So first and foremost, I had actually tried to connect to Russell's energy for about 3 or 4 days before I was actually able to, because the initial days of me trying to connect to him, I could actually connect to him, but he wasn't letting me in. This is what he was doing. And after about the second day of me connecting to him and him just standing there as like the gatekeeper of his own energy, I actually inquired why he didn't want his energy read. And he had said that, real life over here and it's garbage day. He said that he did not want to talk, and he had indicated it was because there was enough being said about him out there on the world stage that he did not, in fact, want to add to the noise. This went on for another couple of days until by the fourth day, when I had connected to him, he actually had acquiesced. But he had acquiesced because I had shared with him that I was coming in being completely unbiased. Again, with the caveat and explaining to him, I'm going to approach this as if he had in fact done what has been alleged against him, but in wanting to be open-minded, in understanding what was going on with him that had actually led to those occurrences. So it was not coming in with any sense of, I'm going to judge you, you have been a very, very naughty man, Russell Brand, but more with like an olive branch. Hey, I just want to know what was going on with you. And if you let me in, I will do the best that I can to bring the information forth in an unbiased fashion. And that is when he had actually acquiesced. And what he had first shared with me is a sense of immense sadness. But it's not immense sadness for what is currently going on with him. It's immense sadness for his childhood, because that's where he wanted to go back, and that's where he wanted to start from. And there was immense sadness in him and all around him as well. The next thing that he had shared with me was when he was approximately 4 years old. And he was sitting down on the floor, and he was crying and crying and crying and crying. Just crying an endless river of tears, so much so that he had cried a little ring all around him of tears. So his tears, there was such an overabundance of this grief that was around him, and his tears and his crying, that it was kind of like, imagine if you will, there was his tears had created water all around him. He was sitting in the middle of it, and he was an island upon himself, surrounded by a river of his own tears. So this is a further expansion of the sense of grief that I had experienced as soon as I had connected to his energy. So he was an island in the middle of his tears, and all of the water and the emotions and the grief had therefore then separated him from others, and he was an island all upon himself. He was separate from other people. Now, this is also an indication of some sort of a trauma, where he felt separated from people because of a trauma that he had endured. Now, as you guys maybe know, or if you're new, you don't know, I don't ever research the topics that I am looking into. Because again, as a channeler, I want the channeled information to come in and be completely pure and completely unbiased with three-dimensional information that is out there in the world on a particular subject or topic that I am looking into. So to that end, I will never look into, on the three-dimensional level, I'll certainly never look into the person in advance to looking into their energy. Now, Russell Brand is somebody that's in popular culture, so I mean, he's kind of my generation. He's a few years older than me, so it's not like he's a complete foreigner to me. It's just to say that I didn't do any advanced research into him. So if you guys have any, and if you maybe know what is the trauma that he had endured, somewhere between, I would say, birth and about approximately 4 years old, you can comment down below and you can tell me what it is. I don't know what it is, and he didn't want to share it with me. He just wanted to share what was the after effects of the trauma that he had endured and why he felt this level of grief all around him, that he felt a need to protect himself and to separate himself from the world. Because here's another thing. What does, this is kind of, just going to very, very briefly touch on like astrology, but all water signs, what is the indication of water? Water is emotions. So the fact that he was insulating himself from other people and he was an island upon to himself because he was surrounded by water is also a representation that water, he was feeling so overly emotional and he was feeling so unsafe with his own emotions that he actually was hiding behind them. He didn't feel comfortable enough to go onto the other side of the emotions that he was experiencing at that time to let people in. So he was an island up onto himself with a barrier of the emotions around him. But here's the thing, because he was so young, he didn't yet have ample coping mechanisms for whatever the grief and trauma was that he was experiencing. So he separated himself from the world because of it. Now, he was also shown to me at this time as being incredibly scared and confused. And again, because he was so incredibly young and he did not have appropriate coping mechanisms for this grief, fear, confusion in a response to a trauma that he had experienced, he had then therefore developed maladaptive coping mechanisms. And what was shown to me is a little bit later on, this had actually manifested as humor. Now, this is first and foremost not to say that every person that has a great sense of humor and who, if you maybe have like that one friend in your group that is always the one that's cracking jokes and is always the one that, you know, if you're having a bad day, you can call them up and they will put a positive spin through humor into the situation. It's not to say that every person that has a good sense of humor and that can elevate other people through their humor is using it as a maladaptive coping mechanism to trauma. No. It's just to say that very much in Russell Brand's case, he was using his sense of humor as a maladaptive coping mechanism. Now, we have also seen this before. In the last Ask Me Anything that I had done, we had also looked into the energy of Chris Farley. And Chris Farley also was somebody that had used his sense of humor as a deflective tool and a deflective mechanism. So here is where there is some similarity between the two of them, but that's as far as the similarities between them actually go. So Russell Brand very much did use his sense of humor as a weapon of deflection. But it's not a weapon where it was designed to hurt other people, except in some cases it could have been used that way. It was more like it was his main defense against people looking too closely at him. Because surely if he was funny, outwardly funny, then people wouldn't think he was anything other than all right. Because how could somebody be this funny if they're not okay? He was using it as a tool of deflection to get people from looking too closely at him. Because again, what was shown early on was he was an island all upon himself, surrounded by tears. But because he was too young to develop coping mechanisms for all of those emotions that he was experiencing, those tears and the emotions just further drove a gap between him and others. Now, in addition to that, furthermore, if he was also funny, he would be popular. And then if he was popular, then he would be too busy being popular to feel what he was actually feeling. And there was so much that he did not want to feel. Again, he didn't share with me what this was. He didn't want to talk about it. He only wanted to simply acknowledge why he had developed this persona of being so darn funny. And it was a tool of deflection to get people, or rather a better way of saying it is to keep people at arm's distance, to keep people a safe distance away from him, so therefore they couldn't get too close. They could actually start to see him and explore and see, is something actually going on with him that's contributing to him being so darn funny? Or he's just funny and we're just going to take him at face value? Or, oh, he's so funny and he's so pleasant to have around that he'll be popular, and then through his popularity, again, through using the tool of the humor, he wouldn't be so busy he wouldn't have a chance to actually explore what it was that was the origin point of the trauma that all of this had actually stemmed from. So thus he was always funny as a deflection, but he never actually learned to turn it off. He never learned balance. He was always on. He was always funny. And what was actually shown to me at this time is that it was actually like there was no Russell behind the humor, because he never learned to actually turn it off, and he was always running away from the trauma and the grief that he had endured in his formative years, that the persona of the humorous Russell almost was like all there ever was. There was nothing behind the scenes going on with him, because it was a mask he had used to hide behind, but because he never took it off, it was energetically sealed onto him. And also, just like with anything we do, we will need to do more and more of it to get the same fix. So if somebody is, what are some positive ways this can manifest? If somebody is very into working out, your muscles will become too used to a particular workout that you constantly have to change it up. That's maybe like a positive way in which this can show up for somebody. But what are some maladaptive ways in overdoing things that can also show up? Which is that if anybody is taking recreational drugs, for example, then they will need to take more and more and more of it to get the same level of a fix from it. So not all things that we are upping are always of a negative nature. Sometimes they're positive. Why do we see people that are always in a gym? Sure, they're kind of getting, the dopamine fix with it because it's something that they genuinely enjoy, and they're in such good shape because they have trained their muscles to need more. So just because something is a needing of more doesn't mean that it's necessarily something that is of a negative nature. However, because again, with Russell, this is something that was built on a maladaptive coping mechanism. In his case, it very much was something of a negative nature. Where he wasn't, here's the thing, at a certain point, it wasn't just enough for him to be funny. He had to be like over the fucking top funny, because everybody had gotten used to like Russell being the funny one. So now he had to be like Russell, the over the top funny one. And then it wasn't even enough for Russell to be over the top funny anymore, so he actually became inappropriate. And there was no end, because it was always an amplification of whatever it had been before. Because he himself, in his effort to run away from his grief and his trauma, was always over amplifying whatever version of himself he actually was at that time, in an effort to get people to continue to look away and to continue to deflect from the things that he was hiding inside of himself. Now, what was also shown to me is at that time that once he had used up all the humor that he had had inside of himself and all the humor that he could muster, he had to then reinvent himself. Okay, everybody knows that you're funny, Russell. Now everybody knows that you're not just funny Russell, you're over the top funny Russell. Oh, now it's like raunchy funny Russell. Oh, now it's just raunchy Russell. So then he was reinventing himself, and he had gone into acting. And he had acted for a great number of years, and then he had decided to transition and to get into YouTube. And I also think I had read that he had been in radio broadcasting as well. Now, understand that every time he was reinventing himself, what was the core reason for the reinvention? It was because he was still trying to run away from himself because he did not have any healthy coping mechanisms to deal with what he was running away from. Now, what's another effective means that somebody may have in running away from themselves? Drugs. Because drugs are the ultimate feel good, numb out, nothing bothers me tool. And since Russell is somebody that was always going over the top with everything that he had done, because everything was an amplification of what had been before, it was the same thing with Russell and drugs. Russell is kind of, if you will, the quintessential example of, what do people say? Like, go big or go home. Russell had no interest in going home, because at home, there would be no distraction from the pain that was inside of him because of a trauma that he didn't even want to discuss with me. So everything, therefore, that he was doing was going big, because the bigger he went with everything, the more he could use that as a way to deflect himself from his own pain, and then therefore also to deflect other people from looking too closely at what was going on with him. And here's also the thing. This actually set him up to be ripe, to be, what's the best way I can put this? This set him up to be ripe, to be a tool for people that wanted to actually create a certain kind of content on TV. Because this is somebody that was genuinely living very much the way he was appearing on TV. Very, very over the top. He didn't really seem to have a lot of a filter, right? Like, he was just saying whatever came to his mind. He wasn't actually like stopping to think like, ooh, I don't know, did I go too far? Should I not say? He was ripe to be used as a tool to create a certain kind of content on TV. And then because he was receiving positive attention for being the over the top version of himself that he actually was, did he have any impetus for actually reining it in at that point? He was getting ample positive attention for being this over the top version of himself that he had been all along. Why would he rein that in at that point? Now, for sure, nobody was going to be looking at him in a way as to try to gauge, why is he the way he is? People can be very easily used in the industry when they have wounding and unhealed trauma within themselves. And I will link it down below. You can go back. To the AMA that I had done, where there was a segment with me and names. I will remember the weirdest things from like my childhood, but can I tell you a segment I had done in an AMA like a couple of weeks ago? No, of course not. Me and names. There was a segment that we had done with an actor in Hollywood. I know that does no good in actually like narrowing it down. Denzel Washington. There we go. I may not be great with names, but they always do eventually come to me. There was a segment that we had done where we had looked into Denzel Washington. And yes, I will link it down below if you want to go back and watch it. But what was something that Denzel Washington had brought forth? That the Hollywood industry is one that is built on the backs, if you will, of very tortured souls. Because who else would want to go into an industry where you're constantly critiqued, where your appearance is demeaned, where you're constantly being judged? It's almost like a reinforcement of people that have like an unhealthy self-image about themselves. So who in the world would want to actually go into this industry? It's wounded souls. Russell is no exception to that rule. He had gone into the industry because guess what? He's a wounded soul as well. But when he was over the top and he was actually getting praise and accolades for being over the top because he had a show in which he could be over the top, well, there you go. It was all the positive reinforcement that he could have ever have hoped to have received at that time. Now, here's a question. What else do we know about drugs? We know that drugs also open us up energetically. Now, I am specifically speaking about recreational drugs. I'm not talking about like if somebody has like high blood pressure and they need to take medication to bring their blood pressure down. That's not what this is about. We are specifically looking into perhaps they're illegal. Maybe they've even been legalized. However, it's drugs that are taken for a recreational purpose. Drugs and alcohol both. And what does drugs and alcohol both do? They open us up and they allow us to be in a more energetically porous state that we can then easily be inhabited by entities. And how does this work? Yeah, if you're wondering, yes, I've done videos on this as well, linked down below. I'm not going to go into, those were like full-length videos. I'm not going to go into the full aspects that were in those videos. I'm going to give you a very, very brief rundown. But if you want to get like the full breadth and scope, go back and watch those videos. However, I'm going to compare it to this. Let's say you are in your car. You're just sitting in your car listening to the radio, maybe, checking your text messages before you start driving to go somewhere. So you're just chilling in your car. And a bird takes a crap right on your windshield. Great. So what might you do in a case like that? You might put your windshield wipers on to clear the windshield of the bird poop. But let's say your windshield wipers no longer have any fluid in them. So what is going to happen in that case is you're going to take the bird poop and you're actually going to smear it all around your windshield, compromising your ability to see what's going on around you. Now, let's say this also happened at night. So now, not only is your vision in the front compromised with the bird poop, it's at night as well. So you're already limited with the amount of what you can see in your environment. Now, let's also say, because a lot of cars today have like sensors in the back that when you're backing up, like your car will let you know if you're too close to the car behind you. Now, let's also say that the bird had pooped on your rear sensors. So as you're backing up to start to drive, you don't know how close you are to the car around you. So your front vision is compromised. It's nighttime, so your periphery vision is compromised. And your back sensors are compromised as well. You're in a compromised situation. Now we're going to say that that car is actually your body. And let's say you are also in a bad neighborhood and the locks on your car don't work. So as you're sitting in your car with bird poop on the front windshield, with bird poop on the back sensors, and it's at night and you can't lock your car, you're in a vulnerable state. And then therefore being in that vulnerable state, how easy might it be for somebody that's across the street, hidden in the dark, watching you, realizing they're a sitting duck? How easy would it be for that person to come over, pull you out of your car, and take your car for a joyride? Now, maybe they're not a complete monster. Maybe they're not going to pull you out of the car and take your car. Maybe they're just going to open up the car door and they're going to say, move the fuck over, the car is mine now. So you might be in the passenger side of your own car being taken on a joyride. But what if this person that has thrown you into the passenger seat, they've already commandeered your car? They're going to go pick up all of their friends and take your car for a joyride. Maybe now you've been thrown into the back seat as they go to pick up their buddy who's now in the passenger seat. Maybe they continue to go pick up a whole host of their other buddies and now you get thrown into the trunk. With each occurrence, you are less and less in control of your body. This is exactly what drugs and alcohol do. They open us up in which we are then slowly, through the use of it, losing control of our body. And if you have ever seen somebody who's passed out drunk, that is where they have literally been thrown into the trunk of their own car. Okay, this is going to come into play, and that's why I am bringing it up. Because what has come out in some of the allegations that were made against Russell is that women were saying he got like a glazed look in his eyes, where it was almost like it wasn't him any longer. Now, why might that be the case? Stay with me, we're gonna explore it. But so Russell was in an energetically compromised state because of the fact that he was abusing drugs and perhaps even alcohol. And when one is in such a compromised state, they are also then therefore doing what? Lowering their own energetic blueprint, which will then line them up with other low energetic blueprint people, places, things, circumstances, events, all things of that nature, because like attracts like. Whatever, if you're in your car and you're turning your car to a certain station that you want to listen to the music, let's say you're turning it to 100.3, you're not going to pick up 92.7. You're going to pick up 100.3. So whatever is a direct vibrational match for the frequency that somebody is on, because of their actions and the choices that they are making, they are going to be a frequency for other people, places, and things that are a energetic match for them. So he had lowered his own energetic blueprint, which was then lining him up with other low energetic blueprint people, places, and things. Now, he did actually go to rehab and clean himself up, and he has been sober since 2003. So he has been sober for 20 years. This is an indication of somebody that was actually exploring how he could, and this is again behind the veil, I'm not saying this is like a conscious thought he had where he was like, I want to raise my energetic blueprint. Maybe it was. But what he was actually subconsciously doing was raising his own energetic blueprint, because he did cut out all of the drugs and the alcohol, which therefore is going to raise his own internal vibration. However, he was still somebody that was monkey vining onto the next addiction, and he had replaced drugs with sex. Wild, I know. I've actually met somebody who, not Russell Brand, somebody that told me they had done the exact same thing, where they had told me they had been a drug addict and they had stopped using drugs, but they were still, I mean, this is not the words that they had used. This is me sharing what was going on behind the veil. They still had not addressed the root cause of what had caused them to become somebody that was abusing drugs and alcohol. They had then therefore monkey-vied onto sex addiction, because until we treat the root cause of whatever it is that is afflicting us, we will monkey-vine onto the next thing that will provide for us a lapse in reality where we do not have to face what is going on inside. And just like this person that I had met, Russell Brand had done the exact same thing. He had traded his drug and alcohol addiction for sex addiction. Just monkey vining from one thing onto another. But wait, it gets so much, there's so much more that came out of this. Now, what was also shown to me is that Russell is somebody that has an enormous amount of anxiety, and therefore, why was he actually drawn to drugs? Because the drugs tapered him out. But in the absence of drugs, sex became the new fix, and it did, in fact, very temporarily take the edge off, but very temporarily. Here's why. This is something that I think I had, because again, this is such an over proliferation of him being in the news and the media right now. Good fucking luck escaping it, right? Something that I think I had actually, someone actually like shared this with me, because again, you can't escape this shit. Like, it might be, I don't want to watch the news, I don't want to talk to people about it. Good the fuck luck. It will still permeate your little bubble. Or especially if people are like, could you look into Russell Brand, because look what I just like read on him. But basically, he was somebody that had bragged, and assuming he was telling the truth about this, but he is somebody that had bragged, this is fucking crazy, that at one point he was having sex 80 times per month. Now, this is not like with one committed partner and they were just fucking hella into each other, that they were just having like a lot of sex, like bunny rabbits. He was having sex with 80 distinct women per month. Now, 80 women per month divvied up over the month is 20 women per week. I'm sorry, 20 women per week, right? 20, 40, 60, 80. 4 weeks in a month, there you go. That comes out to be about 5 women. This is crazy. Think about it. That's about 5 women per 5 weekdays. Maybe it was more like 4 women because he was also having sex on the weekends as well. Stop and think about that. How the fuck did he actually get anything else done in his workday when so much of his time was allocated to sex? Here's why. He was not making sweet love to these women. These were quickies, wham bam, thank you, ma'ams, where it was singularly focused on, first and foremost, his pleasure. He didn't even have time to pleasure these women. So this was singularly focused on his pleasure alone. Stop and think about that. Okay. So, very, very temporary fix where he was having sex maybe 4 to 5 times per workday. And these were quickies that were not designed to bring any pleasure to the women that he was having the quickies with. It was all about him and his pleasure. It was for his soul satisfaction, and it was designed, or why was he going looking for it? So that with the release that he would experience thereafter, it would, for at least a few minutes, it would take the intolerable edge off of what he was feeling. This is someone that was very, very afflicted. Now, what else do we know about hookup culture? That when a person is engaging in sex with multiple partners, and it's without the understanding that when we engage in sexual activities, if you're a woman, then a essence of the man is left behind inside of you. Because think about a woman's anatomy. We are the receivers of the male appendage. So a man is leaving a piece of himself inside of you, but he's also taking a piece of you with him. So through the sexual exchange of intercourse, there is a commingling of the energies as well. And why then, for example, do women usually become more emotionally involved with the partners that they're having sex with? It's because a piece of their energetic essence is left behind inside of them. So Russell is having an overabundance of sexual activities on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And without the understanding that he has to not only clean his physical vessel, but he needs to clean the energetic vessel as well. Because he was carrying a lot of energy tags around with him. I'm going to bring this example back to the car. So let's say this is where you've now gotten control of your car again, and you're like, those motherfuckers, they wrecked the interior of my car because they were doing shots in it, they were smoking, they were eating Doritos, and my car is covered in Dorito crumbs, and there's ashes all over the inside of my car. I got bird poop on the front, I got bird poop on the back. My car is a fucking hot mess. I gotta take it to a car wash. That is where the person is cleansing the physical vehicle, the physical vessel. That's like taking a shower. But if this person is not also understanding or taking the time to actually think about had I perhaps done that had allowed my vehicle to be taken over by these people who took it for a joyride? Like, maybe I should not have been sitting in my car if I know that the locks on my car don't work. In a sus neighborhood where it was nighttime and I can't even see what's around me. So yes, sure, that person can take their car for a car wash, but without the proper internal reflection as to what had gotten them into that position in the first place, could that potentially happen again? Yes, sure. So it is necessary to not only clean the physical vessel, but to clean the energetic vessel, because otherwise it is leaving us equally susceptible to, first and foremost, what? Taking on additional energies and additional entities, which are going to further dysregulate us. And when an entity finally has a body or finally has a car, when someone jacks a car, they're not taking their grandmother to fucking church. They're taking it on a fucking joyride. And when an entity can inhabit a person's body, they're doing the exact same thing. They're gonna engage in a lot of depraved shit. So, Russell, without having the understanding about this, was taking on a lot of different energy tags, which was further compounding his internal sense of dysregulation. The dark glazed look in his eyes that women have actually mentioned in these allegations against him is at a time when he was actually taken over. Because what had one of the women that he was in a relationship with had alleged that she had gone over to his house, and once she had gotten there, had been told that there was another woman in the bedroom and he wanted a threesome. And she was like, that's not happening. So ostensibly he had already been with a woman that was hanging out in his bedroom. Do we know who that woman was? Do we know if she was paid to be there? Do we know if she was just someone else that he was hooking up with? Were they exclusively hooking up? He was just this open, porous fucking vessel that when that glazed look in his eye had come over him, it was because he was actually taken over at that time. There was an entity inside of him. Now, this is also not to say that he's getting a pass. It's not like, well, call the search party off. We got into the bottom line. He was just taken over. It wasn't him. He has no responsibility for what he had done. No. Because here's the thing. He is responsible for the fact that he had created such a hospitable environment for these entities to get inside of him and to take him over and to do fucked up shit with his body when they were inside of him. The onus is still on him. If someone gets their car jacked, the onus is on them for sitting in their car in a sketchy as fuck neighborhood with locks on the door that do not work, sitting there blasting their music, being maybe stoned out of their mind, not being aware of their surroundings. It's not to say that they don't have any responsibility because their car was oh no, they were just the victim of circumstances. Really? That's not the way it fucking works. Like attracts like. Your vibe attracts your tribe. And because Russell was such a low vibration person at this point, because his vessel was completely open to all of these other energies with all of the other women that he was having sex with, that's on him. He created the vibration of himself in which he was then an energetic match to be taken over by entities that were doing fucked up shit with his body. So he first and foremost had made the choices that he had made that opened himself up and allowed his vibration to be what it was, which had then allowed himself to be a vibrational match with these low vibration entities that were inside of him. And what essentially was going on, he was feeding the entities inside of himself instead of feeding the drug addiction. So again, this was just an addiction of another form. But the outcome was, however, the same. Addiction is addiction, no matter what the addiction is actually to. He was super low vibe and therefore a vibrational match for super low vibe entities. So a lot of the time that he was actually casually hooking up with someone to take the so-called edge off, he wasn't even in himself. And that's why he needed to have sex so frequently, 4 to 5 times a day, leading to 80 times per month. Because the energetic release that he was experiencing was where he might have even been overtaken at that time. It wasn't even him that was inside of his body. He was thrown into the trunk of his car, so to say. His car was being taken on a joyride, and the people that were actually inhabiting it, they were having fun with the car. He wasn't having any fun with it. He was thrown into his own internal trunk. So it was kind of like creating a vicious cycle inside of him, where he was so energetically porous and open because he wasn't even getting the release that he needed, what the purpose of what all of this sex was in the first place, that because he wasn't even inside of himself, he just needed to have more of it to get that release that he was so desperately seeking. However, he wasn't even inside of himself to experience the release, so he needed more and more sex, and that was then therefore leading him and very, very energetically porous and very, very energetically open. He was overrun. It was like that party house, but the party house doesn't have locks on any of the doors or the windows, and everybody knows that this is the fucking party house in town. Come on over. Day or night, it doesn't fucking matter. The party house is open. He was actually shown to me at this time as being like a clown car, but instead of carrying clowns around in it, he was carrying other people's energy. What's a clown car? Way, way back in the day, before what are they called? Circuses. Before circuses became a thing of the past, you might go to a circus and you'll see where somebody is a lion tamer, or they're having elephants perform tricks. And then there was the beloved clown car. This tiny little car, maybe it was like a Mini Cooper, maybe it was like a VW Bug. It was a small car. And this car is pulling up and you're thinking, well, how many people can possibly get out of this car? And you're thinking maybe it's going to be 1, maybe it's going to be 2, maybe it's going to be a maximum of 4 people. And one by one, you're seeing these people that are dressed as clowns climbing out of this clown car. And by the end of the clowns climbing out, there was like 20 fucking people shoved in there. And you're thinking, but how do 20 full-sized people fit into that small car? How many entities was Russell Brand carrying around with him that couldn't be seen with the naked eye? Just like if you are not well down on that stage, can you see how many clowns are shoved in there? So as an outsider looking in and looking at Russell, they're looking at him and thinking, wow, he's got a good job, he seems to have his shit together, completely not understanding how overrun with entities he was. So he was that clown car carrying around energetic tags of hundreds of women at any given time. That will dysregulate somebody. Now, interestingly enough, what was actually, she plays a tiny role in this, maybe 1 minute's worth. But Katy Perry was shown to me as being a temporary bright spot for him. They were drawn to each other because there was a lot of fire between them. So there was a lot of sexual compatibility between these two that initially had drawn them together. However, Katie was on her way up, and therefore she was being worked to the bone. And no one cared that it had been weeks upon weeks upon weeks, and Katie hadn't seen her husband when they were still newlyweds. They were married for, I think, just under 2 years. Therefore, what do we know about Russell? He was always running away from himself and from his own issues. And in the absence of having Katie there with him, boredom ensued, and the need to run away from his unhealed trauma reared its ugly head again, and therefore he actually started to cheat on her. Because again, there was a void of proper coping mechanisms. So while there was an early rush between the two of them, with her gone so much of the time, working on elevating her own career, the rush was gone with her, and thus he was left to his own devices. Now, what was next shown to me is that Russell had had some sort of a dark night of the soul somewhere around 2015, maybe 2014, 2015. I'm going to say that after his marriage to Katy Perry had broken up, he probably had like a 2-year fuck fest. Excuse my language, but with someone like him, let's be realistic here. And I think the 2-year fuck fest actually energetically was starting to really take a toll on him and weigh down on him. And therefore he had had an internal crisis that had really woken him up somewhere around 2014, 2015. And what had happened at that time is he was cleaning himself up, he was cleaning his vibration up, and he started to feel called to start speaking out because suddenly he was seeing the world with crystal clear eyes. And for anybody that's watching this video, when you have had your dark night of the soul, you know what that feels like. It's suddenly like you're seeing the world without the veil. And it's like, holy fucking hell. What world have I actually been living in all this time? And therefore, he was able to actually see himself more clearly. And he was able to come to the conclusion, or the realization is a better way of saying it, that all the time that he had spent having completely meaningless sex with all of that people was an effort to run away from himself. And the dark night of the soul had drove him, therefore, out of himself and out of his selfish ways, in which he realized that nothing was going to matter anymore because there was a bigger universal truth at play. And where he realized there was not going to be any him or anyone left if he did not start speaking out about it. Because there's kind of like been this push to eradicate, if you will. It's weird. It's going to sound incongruent. It's almost like there is this push to create more division and separation between us based on race or gender, but at the same time, it's to turn us into nothing more than our race and gender. So it's an effort to actually erase all of the individuality that we have inside of us and just kind of like turn us into nothing more than like the way in which you sexually identify yourself and the way in which you would like identify yourself, right? Like I am Faye. My name is Faye. I have blonde hair, I have blue eyes, and I have white skin. Does that tell you anything actually about me? Nothing. It tells you next to nothing based on just the fact of my physical attributes. Do you know anything? You don't know anything actually about me. So there's an effort to actually eradicate anything that makes people who they are other than what their physical attributes, gender, and race are. And he was waking up to this and he was getting savvy to this. So it's almost like his own internal ego had been, I don't want to say completely eviscerated. I just more want to say that like he was understanding having an ego wasn't going to actually save him at that any longer. And that the over-identification that he had had to his ego was what had gotten him into some bad situations that he had been in. So he's like, I got to start speaking out about this because soon there's not going to be me or anybody left. He felt called to it at that time. Now, interestingly enough, you may be wondering, okay, Faye, I'm with you till this far. Why was he ever allowed to start speaking out about these things, however? First and foremost, there's been a gradual... I've only watched a couple of his YouTube videos. I'm really not well-versed in the things that he has spoken about, but again, because there's such an overproliferation of him being in the news and the media at this time, a lot of people have shared a lot of things with me, and it seems like there has been an uptick in the things that he has been speaking about, where now he's like talking about like the fires in Maui having been directed energy weapons, and they were not like natural occurrences. That's something that's relatively recent, right? So maybe in the beginning he was exploring, he was kind of like, a newborn baby. Like it takes this progression for a newborn baby to, start to sit up and then start to crawl and then start to walk. So he was kind of, if you will, like exploring his own beliefs as he was waking up to all of the things that are going on in the world. But there's definitely been an uptick, which is again why I find it particularly interesting and notable, why all of these allegations are only coming out really now. There was a documentary made on him, right? And all of this is coming to light with some sort of like a news article in which had investigated him. Now, I haven't read the article and I haven't seen the documentary. I have, however, heard from people who have seen it and who have read it that it seems to be, and if you have actually watched it or read it, comment down below and let me know. But at least what I've heard, it seems like there has been some sort of a overt bias against him. And again, full disclosure, I haven't read it. I haven't seen it. This is just what has been reported back to me. If you've experienced it differently, please do comment down below and let me know. So again, why was he allowed to be talking out about this before all of this had happened? And that is because no one at the top thought that he would be taken seriously. And here's why. He was a sex-addled comedian, actor, all-around Lothario, suddenly turned guru and conspiracy theorist. Snort. Eye roll. Okay, no one's gonna take him seriously. He's got too much baggage behind him. However, something interesting happened. What was it? People did take him seriously, and here's why. He was actually shown to me as being somehow exactly what the world needed at this particular time. And why? He's the perfect counterbalance to the well-dressed but smarmy politicians that will lie to you like a lover and tell you one thing to get you into bed, but then tell you something completely different once you're actually there. He's also a perfect counterbalance to the smarmy and well-dressed pastors with their permanently fixed grins on their faces. The lights are on, but no one's home. They have no depth and they have no character. So he's actually the perfect counterbalance to what people are waking up to and becoming savvy to, which is just because somebody has the pedigree and just because somebody went to Yale or Harvard and they wear a nice suit and they speak real nicely doesn't mean they're trustworthy. But Russell was someone who is a real person with a real history, with a real past, with real mistakes. He had a history, and not always was it a pleasant one, but that he is a real person that has had real struggles. However, he had done the deep internal work to get onto the other side of it, and to then therefore become a truth teller. And as more and more of us are going through our own in our own internal or the collective dark night of the soul, in which en masse the population is waking up more and more every single day, who better to show us the way than one who has himself struggled, such as him? Who better to show us the way than one who isn't perfect? Because guess what? We aren't perfect either. Who's more relatable to us? Someone that has been into the bowels of hell and has come out the other side being a truth teller? Or someone that is a career politician and who has never had a job outside of Washington, D.C., and therefore they are so owned and so corrupted that if not for the door, then their name listed on their door to their office, they themselves wouldn't even know who they are any longer. He's the perfect counterbalance to those kind of people that are espousing how right they are and how much more they know about the state of affairs because they're career politicians. Now, this is when I was channeling the information that something I had seen years ago had popped into my mind. And if at this point you know me, you know that when a thought, however random it appears to be, I know it's not random. It's where my guides are bringing me something. It's a memory of something meant for me to share in the context of this video. And I had remembered watching years ago, this is probably at least like 4 or 5 years ago. Do you all remember when like Brene Brown was like the hottest fucking thing? She was trending everywhere. Brene Brown talks on YouTube, Brene Brown books, right? She was everywhere. And it was at this time that I was channeling the information that something I had seen years ago, again, probably 4 to 5 years ago, specifically something that Brene Brown had said, like flittered into my mind. And I was like, I wonder why this just popped into my head. So I'm going to share with you what came in, and then I'm going to share with you why it had come in. Which is that Brene had said, you will never be criticized by somebody that is doing more than you. You will only be criticized by someone that is doing less than you. Why? Because someone that is doing more than you, they don't have time to stop doing what they're doing, look around and look at the other people that are working their hardest to get shit done and be like, you're not doing enough. They don't have fucking time to do that. But you know who does? Someone that's doing less than you. And I think Brene Brown kind of likened it to like, who's in the arena? Who's in the arena with you? Because someone that is in the arena with you, someone that is showing up every day and doing the best that they can, they see you. They see how hard you're working. They're not going to be like, you're not working hard enough. But you know who's going to do that? It's the people that are not in the arena, but the spectators that are sitting in the arena and are conversing amongst themselves about you, that you're not doing enough. Meanwhile, what are they doing? They're sitting on their fucking asses watching you in the arena. And another thought that's actually coming to mind right now is like, think of like what was done during like was it the Roman Empire? Where they had the gladiators? The fucking gladiators were in the arena, literally fighting for their life among other gladiators or even animals. And meanwhile, these amphitheaters that could hold thousands of people were all sitting there looking at the gladiators in it. I'm not saying this is for sure what they were doing, but I'm kind of like imagining this is it. These gladiators are in there fighting for their life, and there's thousands upon thousands of people that are sitting in the stands, and they're like watching what the gladiators are doing, and they're critiquing them while they are sitting luxuriously where their life is not on the line. Why was this relevant? Why did this come up? This again pertains to why, if these allegations of the sexual impropriety and the allegations of non-consensual sex, which again, I am taking at face value, and I am saying these things actually had happened, right? But why is it only coming to the fore now? These things happened over 10 years ago. Why now is this all anybody is talking about? Why now? Where Russell Brand has been demonetized on YouTube. 6 million subscribers, I think, right? He is not making any money on his YouTube content any longer because he has already been found to be guilty in the court of public opinion when not a single charge has actually been brought against him in the criminal justice system. This is not a critique about that. There are so many reasons why a woman might actually choose not to speak out and why a woman might actually choose not to bring charges against somebody. This is not about that. I'm recognizing that there are reasons that would hinder a woman from wanting to actually bring charges. And I think actually one of the women had said that she felt like, well, who am I? I'm going up against Russell Brand. He has attorneys that are going to fight all of this shit off. Who's going to believe me? They're just going to look at me like I'm a jilted ex-lover. That's a really great motivation for a woman to be like, I'm not going to come forward. But again, why then now? Why then now? When his platform is so big and his reach is so vast, why then now? And here's why. This is where the Brene Brown comment had come in. Because people that are doing more than you are never going to be the ones that are going to criticize because they don't have time to stop and look and say you're not doing enough. But the people who are doing less, they certainly will. That's what's actually going on here right now. Where real reporters, because there was a documentary that was made and this was written up an article about him, real reporters and real journalists who once did real research. It's not to say that their research is faulty here. Follow where I'm going. Real reporters and real journalists who once did real research and wrote real stories. Again, not that this is not a real story, but again, why is it suddenly relevant now? Why was this not relevant over 10 years ago? Because at that time, his image was being used to be this raunchy person. And all of these allegations were completely in line with the raunchy persona that he was being used for. But now, not any longer. So real reporters and real journalists who once upon a time did real research and wrote real stories have now resorted to writing hit pieces on political opponents whose name was written on a piece of paper and handed to them and said, here, write a hit piece on this person. So those journalists are the ones that are actually doing less, not more. Here's why. Because instead of these journalists biting the corrupt hand that feeds them and writing about their corrupt overlords who are actually noteworthy and newsworthy of their own behavior. In the journalist's boredom of their own once used and valued minds, they have now resorted to writing hit pieces on political opponents that actually aren't afraid to speak the truth while they are. They have a solid paycheck. They have a steady paycheck. They just had to sell their soul. And they had to abdicate the pursuit of what journalists used to do, which is investigate stories. They used to actually investigate stories. They used to actually corroborate certain instances and certain things before they would go to press. They are not, this is not saying And here, again, here's the thing. This is not an attack on either side. This is an attack on both sides. Because one thing that has become, and again, this is 2% opinion, but one thing that has become evident, very, very abundantly clear through this whole Russell Brand situation that I have personally seen is where both sides are being dishonest. Even the right. Not as in they are the right, or they're in the right side, the conservative side, because they are leaving things out. They are lying through omission to make Russell Brand to appear to be more pious and holy than he in fact is. Because he's one of us now, so we have to rally around him and we have to protect him. No, that's not the way it works. Two things can be true simultaneously. Somebody can speak the truth and you can appreciate and value the truth that they are actually speaking. But it doesn't mean that because you agree with everything they say, you give them a pass on their previous bad behavior. And leaving it out through omission is lying. So a lot of the conservatives on the right are actually lying by way of omission to make Russell Brand appear to be not as bad as he actually allegedly might be. And the left equally is attacking him as well. And they're trying to discredit everything he says because of his character. So both sides are actually picking and choosing when it comes to Russell Brand, what is valid and what is important to share with their viewers or their readers. And why? Because they're trying to influence the masses. This is exactly what the news does as well. We will tell you what you need to know because we can't trust you with the actual truth of the matter. So the reporters out there on both the left and both the right, one could say that maybe even the pundits on the right are actually not intentionally misleading their viewers. Maybe it was sloppy investigations that they have done into his background, and that's why they're choosing not to say certain things about him. Maybe it's because it's not a choice at all. They just don't know what they don't know. Guess what? That's still sloppy journalism, and they're still not doing enough to bring the truth to the people, to the masses. So everything that we see playing out, that these allegations that have happened years ago are only now first coming to the fore. This in particular, and why this is so newsworthy and noteworthy, is because these journalists are energetically attacking somebody that is not afraid to speak the truth, because they are. Because they're owned. So that is my energetic reading on Russell Brand. As I always say, please take what resonates and leave the rest behind, because this is a controversial video, and I acknowledge that. Don't shoot the messenger, guys. This is just channeled information. You are welcome to disagree with it without leaving a nasty comment or leaving any comment. So again, just please take what resonates, leave the rest behind, and until next time, and as always, stay in the high vibration.